Hello everybody. Today we are taking a look at a really cool and kind of historical piece of vintage video equipment. This is a Videonics model MX-1 digital video mixer. This is a prosumer grade video switcher, and it was made in 1997. We've looked at video switchers in the past. I made a two-part deep dive video into the Sony DFS 700. That is a professional grade, broadcast grade video switcher, albeit a small one. This is a prosumer grade switcher, or really, it could also be considered a consumer grade enthusiast piece of equipment too, because certainly there were just plain old consumers who bought these to play with them. But the biggest market was prosumer videographers, people who videotaped weddings. Churches bought these. And that is where Videonics, if you've never heard of them, that was their bread and butter market. In fact, that's pretty much the only market that they cater to, was the prosumer and really high-end enthusiast consumer market. Videonics was an American company. They started in 1987, and their first product was called the Direct Ed. It was a really strange video editing system that loaded part of its operating system from a VHS tape, and you completely controlled it using an infrared handheld remote control. And it was like an all-in-one consumer video editing system. It could do really basic titling. It could do assemble editing. And it's such a fascinating and odd piece of equipment that I decided I want one to show you guys. And so as of this taping, I currently have one coming from eBay. But that was Videonics' first product, and they kind of updated that over the next few years. In 1991, they came out with the Title Maker, which was a character generator, and that was a really popular product, and I think that was when Videonics really became well known. I have a Title Maker. We will take a look at it in a future video. And through the 90s, Videonics kind of really blew up and became really successful. They made tons of different products. They made an A/B roll edit controller that could work with consumer and professional grade VTRs. I have one of those too, and we will look at it in a future video. And in the late 90s, they came out with upgrades to the Title Maker. They came out with upgrades to this that added some new features. And then with the advent of non-linear video editing, Videonics kind of faded away. In the early or mid-2000s, they were sold to another company called Focus Enhancements. And that was kind of the end of Videonics. Once non-linear editing came around, especially once Apple came out with the iMac and with iMovie in the late 90s, suddenly there was no market for stuff like this anymore, and Videonics really didn't know how to move forward, and so they didn't. But in the 90s, they were really big, and products like this that we're going to look at today were really popular. And something else that's kind of cool is that although this particular product, this video switcher, was intended for the prosumer market, these did get used at real television stations. How do I know that? This one came from one. I got this with a bunch of other equipment that came from a community television station that sadly shut down in 2009. It was part of Fundy Cable's network of cable community stations, just like the TV station that I now work at came from. And unfortunately, and you know I've told this story before, throughout the 2000s, Rogers Cable, who took over the cable system from Fundy Cable, they shut down all of the old Fundy Cable community television stations. They did it because they didn't want to spend the money to keep them running, especially because they were busy replacing the legacy coaxial cable system with fiber optic cable, and it would have cost too much to upgrade all of these little community television stations to be able to broadcast on this fiber network. So they chose to just shut them down instead. That same fate would have happened to the TV station that I now work at if we didn't get our broadcast license in 2005, 2006. So we were able to survive, but most of the others sadly weren't. So this unit and a few other pieces of equipment I got, which I'll show in future videos, came from one of those stations up in Harvey Station, New Brunswick. There was a Cable 10 Harvey. They were a really tiny station, basically run by one guy and a few volunteers. And this was their video switcher, and that's pretty cool. And kind of funny is, I didn't get just one of these. I got two of them. There's the other one sitting over there, and that's the one that we're going to be demonstrating later. You can see I've already got it hooked up to some monitors and some other equipment. So that's where this came from. But Cable 10 Harvey weren't the only TV station around here that used a Videonics switcher. We did too. This was our first video switcher. I've dug into our archives, and from what I can find, we got it in early 1996. And we started broadcasting in 1993. So you may wonder, if this was our first video switcher, what were we doing for our first 3 years of operation? And the answer is we used a homemade mechanical switcher. It was lovingly called the Bang Box, and you just plugged your cameras into it and plugged your VCR, or the VHS VCR that we were using, on the other side of it. And when you push the button, the mechanical button for whatever camera you wanted, it mechanically made the connection, the composite video connection between that camera and the VCR. And it worked, barely, because there was no synchronization between the cameras. Every time you switched a camera, the picture would roll. It would roll vertically and it would wiggle horizontally. And it did that because there being no synchronization between the cameras, every time the video signal suddenly changed, it was jarring for the VCR, and the VCR would have to resync itself. So that's what we did for our first 3 years of operation. And then we got this, and the Videonics switcher was such a huge upgrade from what we were doing. And that in general is why these were such an important and became such a popular product, not just for prosumers, but for the low-end broadcast market. All of your tiny community television stations that were often just run by volunteers and it relied on donations to keep the lights on, who could never afford a real video switcher from the likes of Sony or Panasonic. And all of a sudden Videonics comes along with a switcher that is so much more affordable, yet does everything, and in some cases more, than what the much more expensive pro grade switchers could do. So it was such an important product on the market for community stations in general, including ours. And I'd like to make this point to you another way. In 1996, we did an episode of our show, St. Andrews Today. It was the only program that we did at that time. It was just the one show that aired a couple of times a day on the channel. And in 1996, on an episode of St. Andrews Today, our co-founder, Brian, gave a tour of the TV station at that time. And he showed all the equipment that we used to tape shows. He showed the consumer grade VHS camcorders we were using. and all the other equipment, retired 1980s Commodore computer monitors that we were using for video monitors, all the stuff that we had managed to scrape up to make a basic television station work in the 1990s. And he talked about the Videonics switcher and how big of an improvement it was for everything we were doing. So I will let Brian take it away in 1996.
You're watching St. Andrew's Community Channel. Keep in touch with Cable 10.
The next piece of equipment is the showpiece, I guess, of our whole workshop here. It doesn't look like a whole lot, but it is the heart and soul of everything that we do. As you know, we've been running Community Channel for 3 years now, and we've been saving our pennies. We are a non-profit organization, but we do make a little bit of money from time to time in tape sales and occasional donations. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. This equipment is relatively inexpensive in the larger scheme of things, but to a non-profit organization it meant that it fairly well drained our resources, but it was well worth it because it allowed us to make the timely move from the facilities in St. Stephen, where we've been working weekly for the last several years, to the community college where we can do our editing weekly right here without having to travel. Not only that, in St. Stephen, the community channel has recently been moved from its Fundy Cable location into the high school, which is a good thing on the one hand because it puts all of that specialized equipment into the hands of the students who have use of it through the day. After hours, it's available to the community channel there. However, it means for us here that access is not necessarily that easy. In the past, we've had our own keys to the studios in St. Stephen. That won't be available anymore. You have to contact a person, that person has to meet you, let you in, and so on. You have to set your timetabling up on a calendar. So we decided that it was a good time for us to look into making the move to trying to get ourselves established here right in our own backyard. And to do that, we decided that a digital video mixer would be the tool to allow this to happen. The nice thing about this piece of equipment is that it is digital, and it's printed right here if you see that. That means that whatever camera source or VCR source we choose to use to send our video signals through to our record deck, that this piece of equipment will take the VCR signal or the camera signal and convert it by digitizing it and then sending it out as an analog signal to the tape. So the signal is momentarily digitized, and that allows us therefore to have glitch-free edits or cuts or dissolves or special effects or whatever you want to do. So that is the underlying feature of this piece of equipment, which makes it so very valuable. The second thing about it is that it has well over 200 special effects that we can use. It also has a chroma key and luminance. What that means is that we can produce the same effects that you would see, say, on the Weather Channel or any station when they're doing the weather show. You know very well that that weather map they're referring to is not behind them. It's on a monitor off to the side, and it's brought up through the computer onto the screen. This piece of equipment will allow us to do that very thing, and we may be doing that at some point in the future.
So that's why I say that this video switcher was kind of historical. These were a big deal, not only for the prosumer market, but the low-end professional market too. Tiny public access television stations, a lot of them got off the ground with this and with Videonics equipment in general. And there's two big reasons for that. First of all, this was cheap. This cost $1,200, and while that's, you know, in a vacuum expensive, this was at a time when the lowest end, simplest professional grade video switchers from someone like Panasonic or Ross Video here in Canada cost a minimum of $5,000. And this $1,200 switcher can do a lot more than those $5,000 switchers could do. And actually, there's a couple of things that this can do that even $10,000 or $20,000 video switchers could not do. This made really cool functionality really accessible. And that's one of the reasons why these were such a mover and a shaker for even the low-end broadcast market. The second reason, you could use these with consumer-grade cameras and VCRs. If we take a look at the back, this is a completely portable switcher, so unlike something like the DFS 700 where you have the control panel and then the frame that mounts in a rack, this is all a self-contained portable unit. So you can see it's all composite and S-video inputs and outputs. There's no component, there's no SDI. This was designed to work with consumer and prosumer grade cameras and VCRs. So very, very accessible that way. Also, do you notice something missing from the back of this? There's no Genlock outputs on this thing. You do not need to Genlock your sources to use them with this thing. Every input, this is a 4-input switcher, every input has a frame buffer. So you do not need Genlock. You may recall in my video series on the Sony DFS 700, that switcher, like the vast majority of professional grade video switchers, everything needs to be Genlocked. All your cameras, your VTRs, anything that you're going to put into the switcher needs to be Genlocked. The switcher provides a black burst output, which is just a black composite video output. And you need to use cameras and VTRs that have a black burst input on them so they can be synchronized to the video switcher. And things won't work if you don't have everything Genlocked. If you want to use say a consumer VCR or something that doesn't have a Genlock input with a video switcher that requires Genlock, you would have to buy a device called a frame synchronizer. You plug your source into the frame synchronizer, you plug your black burst reference signal into the frame synchronizer, and then the frame synchronizer retimes the signal, and then you plug the output of the frame synchronizer into your switcher. You don't need to do any of that with this. Just plug your standard composite or S-video consumer equipment into this thing. Every input's on a frame buffer, no Genlocking required. And that means that not only was there an affordable but pretty powerful video switcher available to these tiny television stations, but those same tiny television stations could also buy affordable consumer-grade cameras, camcorders, and VCRs to use with it. Not only that, this thing has a built-in time-based corrector on every input. Granted, they only put it there because they had to, so that you could use this with analog VCRs that don't have a built-in time-based corrector. And from what I've read, it's actually not a very good time-based corrector, something like what you'd get in a Sony Digital 8 or Mini DV camcorder works a lot better. But again, for a prosumer grade piece of equipment that cost $1,200 in the 90s, the fact that it has even the most rudimentary time-based corrector available on every input is very impressive. So Videonics and this video switcher really was important in the 90s. These were very, very well loved by the TV stations that used them, and the prosumer, you know, wedding photographers and church videographers and all the prosumer people who use these as well. They really liked them, so I'm really excited to get to show you this one today. So let's take a look at this thing. I'll turn it around again. So you saw the inputs. This is a 4-input switcher. You have your choice of composite or S-video on each input, and your program output, same thing, composite or S-video. You have to choose one or the other. You can't use both at the same time. And you may also notice there's audio jacks on the output and the first three inputs. The fourth input does not have any audio facilities. So this thing can switch audio as well. It is not a mixer. It's not an audio mixer, and how a lot of people use these was just they completely ignored the audio functionality, just used it purely as a video switcher, and then they had a separate audio mixer that they did all the audio stuff on. And my demonstration today is going to largely ignore the audio stuff too, although I will show you a little bit of it. But this thing can't mix audio, but it can switch between it. So you can set it that so that whatever input you switch to, it'll switch to that audio input as well, and it'll come out the audio jacks on the program output. But you can also configure it to basically route the audio any way you want. You can route the audio from one input to another input if you want. You can route a particular audio input to multiple video inputs. And I haven't actually tested this yet, but the manual, the user manual, suggests that if you do something like a dissolve, you can actually, it'll actually fade between the two audio sources rather than just cutting. I haven't actually tested that, so maybe we'll test that here too. But yeah, you can route the audio any way you want. And so that's actually that is useful in some cases. For example, you might have an audio mixer and have it coming into the output of that audio mixer coming into your first input. And then you might have a VCR going into your second input. And so whatever input your VCR is on, you may configure this thing so that for all the other inputs, it just uses the one audio input. But when you switch to the VCR, it switches to the VCR's audio input. And so that way, you know, if you're taping a 3-camera shoot, and then the host of your show throws to a video clip, you can live switch to your VCR and it switches the audio as well. And if you dissolve to your VCR, it'll fade the audio, supposedly. So that's nice. So yeah, composite, S-video, and audio. Fourth input, no audio facilities. You get a composite preview output. So just like a real video switcher, because in my opinion, this is a real video switcher, you get your program output and you get a preview output. And that preview output can work just like it does on a normal video switcher, where it'll show you the source that will be switched to when you execute a switch, be it a dissolve or a wipe or some other effect. But the preview output is also used, it's kind of imperative, because if you want to do anything more than the most basic functions on this, the user interface for configuring and setting up those functions will be on the preview output. So you'll see that when we demonstrate this. You get a headphone jack, and that is so you can listen to whatever audio is coming out of the program output. So in addition to the RCA jacks, you get a headphone jack as well. You get a GPI, general purpose input jack, so that's very nice. So that means you can hook this thing up to something like an edit controller and use it as part of your editing facilities for executing transitions between VCRs when you're doing A/B roll editing. So that's very nice. And then you get your power jack. This uses a 12-volt AC power supply. If we look at the bottom, it's funny, this sticker on the bottom is the only place where the name Video Mixer shows up. It's not anywhere else on the unit, it's not in the manual or anything, so I can only assume that Video Mixer was maybe a prototype name for this thing. It's the model MX-1 NTSC. There was a PAL version, 12 volts AC, 1.2 amps. This was assembled in Mexico, and this particular one was made second week of 1997. And my other one, because recall I got two of these, the one that we'll be actually demonstrating today, that one's slightly older. It was made in 1996. I don't know why Cable 10 Harvey had two of these. The only thing I can think of is that this particular unit actually has a minor electronic problem. Its chroma keyer isn't working right for some reason. We'll talk about that a bit later. I do have a video clip showing the chroma keyer being broken, but yeah, these have a chroma keyer, you can see. And yeah, the one on this unit is not working properly. The one on the other unit works fine, so maybe that has something to do with it. Another minor issue that both of these have, that I've somewhat remedied, is when I tested both of these, both of them, the keypads didn't work very well. You can see you've got a rubber membrane keypad, and you had to press really hard to make the key presses register. So I've taken both of these apart and I've cleaned up the key contacts, and they don't work great, but they work better than they did. And I will say, taking one of these apart, not fun. If you have one of these and it's working fine, I don't recommend you try and disassemble it. These are packed with a scary amount of electronic componentry. There is some integration, of course, but not nearly as much as you might think, given that this is, just kind of a small plastic box. There are about 150 electrolytic capacitors in this, and there are just dozens upon dozens, if not hundreds, of discrete resistors and diodes and all manner of other components. There's tons of integrated circuits, tons of custom chips. I don't know if they're ASICs or FPGAs or what, but there's tons of those. These are absolutely packed to the gills with video components. It's a multi-layer board, so unless you have the right equipment, you're not going to be able to recap one of these. And if I could, that's what I would try on this unit with the chroma keyer that doesn't work quite right. Is I can only assume that maybe it's bad capacitors. Stuff from the late 90s doesn't usually suffer from bad capacitors, but that's a possibility with these. I don't have anything to back it up, but I found a Reddit post where someone said that these often suffer from bad capacitors, but that's the only anecdote or evidence of that I can find. But maybe it's true. Maybe bad capacitors are affecting these things. But yeah, super packed inside, not really repairable unless you have the right equipment. And also, just to get these apart, you actually have to desolder the fader. For some reason, this fader on a high-end video switcher, this fader would come apart, and these two little handles would come off, so that the rest of it, this thin little bar in the center, could just slip through the hole when you're taking the cover off. This thing, there doesn't seem to be any way to disassemble the T-bar so you can do that. So you actually have to desolder the potentiometer so that you can get the two case halves apart. So yeah, all in all, not fun. And if you don't need to get in one of these, I just don't recommend it. So with that said, let's take a look at what's going on here. So obviously you saw the fader. This works just like the fader on any professional video switcher that you can use to manually go between transitions. This is a power switch, and that's a power LED. These two LEDs here, they show whether the audio or the video is going to be switched the next time you perform a transition, either by using the fader or by hitting this button marked play, which is basically just what a professional video switcher would call auto transition or auto trans. This is your auto trans button. So these lights show what will be switched next when you execute a transition. These light up solid to show what's currently on air, and your next transition, the LED will flash. So here's all your controls, and although they are technically different, you can kind of think of this as your program bus and this as your preview bus, just like any other video switcher. You can see these buttons are labeled cut, and when you press cut for your 4 inputs labeled A, B, C, or D, it'll cut to that input. Whatever input is on screen, if you go down here and press one of these buttons, that is your next input. That is what's going to be transitioned to when you execute a transition. So just like any pro-grade video switcher, you can really think of this as your program bus and your preview bus. You can see there's also a color key for program and preview. This does have a color generator. It's not a full-blown matte generator with patterns and stuff like we saw on the DFS 700. This just makes solid colors, but you can choose whatever color you want. This thing can produce 1,000,000 different colors. And so you have program and preview buttons for that. And there's buttons that quickly get you to a certain type of transition. This thing has, I think, 200 different transitions. Obviously, there's many variants of the same, like 10 kinds of transitions. But if you press any of these keys, it gives you the basic version of each transition. So if you just want it to be a dissolve, you can press this, or a wipe, or a zoom effect, or picture-in-picture, or a flip effect. This has a frame grab function, this freeze button, so you can hit this button and it freezes whatever's on the screen. It's not as fancy as this function in the Sony switcher where you can use it as its own input. This just freezes the program output, basically. Speed adjusts the speed of transition, so when you hit your auto take button, you can choose what speed the transition executes at. And you'll use this navigation pad in the user interface. Same with these number buttons. You can punch in the number for a transition that way. For your color function, you have your back color and your border color. So transitions, certain types of transitions, the video sources they can be outlined in a color border, so you can choose what color that border is. And then, of course, it's got a demo function. We'll look at that. Setup function lets you configure settings. A learn function, I believe that's similar to the function in the DFS 700 where you can kind of like set up a macro and then have it execute that macro. Very useful for editing, actually. This thing has a chroma keyer. Oddly enough, so this has a fully functional chroma keyer, and when it's working properly, which it's not in this particular specimen, it's actually pretty good. It's not a bad chroma keyer. This doesn't have a luma keyer. Very, very odd. Or I should say it's not fully implemented. So this does have a luma key function, but it's implemented as a transition. And it's a cool looking transition when you use it that way. But what Videonics intended you to do when you use the luma keyer is you basically use the fader to set the level of keying. And this is just useless to me. Like, why did they implement luma keying this way? I have no idea. So in my opinion, it's more or less useless. You might as well use the chroma keyer. The chroma keyer works just fine for keying out white and black, just like it is for keying out colors. And then the compose function is actually really cool, and not a lot of video switchers. I mean, I personally don't know of any other video switchers that have this function, but the compose feature is a really basic graphics composer where you can draw rectangles and lines on the screen and choose whatever color you want for all of them. You can do frame grabs of any of the inputs and put those on the screen, and you can basically compose a graphic made up of rectangles and lines and frame grabs, and kind of just make a slide with it. And I can imagine people using this function alongside a character generator to make kind of a rudimentary title slide or something like that. So that's pretty cool. And we'll demonstrate that along with all of the functions in this video. And that's all I can demonstrate with just sitting here, but of course, you guys, just like me, we want to see this thing in action. So give me a moment. I am going to set up the other unit sitting over there, get everything all wired up, and we will demonstrate the Videonics MX-1 digital video mixer. All right, so I've got everything just about wired up, I think. So here's how everything is connected. I'll start with the inputs. So my first input on this thing is this digital 8 camcorder. I'm only using it as a camera, and it's wired up into the first input through S-Video right here. My second input is color bars being generated by the Leech sync pulse generator, a piece of equipment that we've used in a past video. So that is coming in right here over composite, of course. My third input is this VHS VCR, one you haven't seen before. We will look at this in a future video. So that's coming in input 3, composite, of course. And I've got audio from the VCR coming in as well. And that's my only audio source that I'm bothering to hook up. And then my fourth input is this character generator. Again, another piece of equipment we'll look at in the future. That is coming in here through S-Video. My program output is coming into this monitor over S-Video, and then it's being looped from this monitor into this digital 8 camcorder. So this will be recording the program feed for you guys. And then my preview output is going into this monitor and then being looped into this high 8 camcorder. So this will be recording the preview output for you guys. And I've also got program audio coming out. That is going into the high 8 camcorder. I don't have the AV cable to hook audio into this camcorder, so I'm running program video into here, but program audio into here. Yep, this will be very fun for me to get all synced up in editing. So yeah, I think that's it. I've got the owner's manual beside me because I think I'll have to refer to it a couple of times for some of the features. And now all I've got to do is find a way to get my phone hanging from there so that it's pointing down at this, so you guys will be able to see what buttons I'm poking. So I'll figure that out, and then we'll be off to the races. Exciting. All right, I think everything's recording. There is a wonderful cacophony of CRT monitors whining and 8mm camcorders recording away. So here we are. I'm going to hit the power switch. We are greeted with a neat splash screen that says copyright 1994, and there I am. It goes right to the first input. So yeah, here I am, the camcorder. And I'll just start right away so you can see when I hit the cup buttons. There's the color bars and the VCR. Let's get that playing. And you can see that work. That the built-in time-based correctors on every input. There we go.
That the most costly
Yeah.
item in the trucking business is fuel.
You better believe we got flow scan. And then on the fourth input, the character generator, we've got the Maritime Girl in white text on a green background. So yeah, you can see I'm just hitting the cup buttons here, and
now there's a device
everything's working. Now you may notice something right off the bat. If you just watch when I hit the cut buttons here, I did not do a bad job editing this video, or at least I didn't intend to. What's actually going on is that indeed, you know, there is a lot of technology packed into this $1,200 box. They had to cut costs somewhere, right? And so one of the cost-cutting measures is that this thing's actually slow. Generally, in the broadcast industry, it is completely unacceptable for any video switcher to be anything but instant when you hit buttons. When you hit a button, it needs to execute whatever function instantly. This thing does not do that. When I hit the cut button, there is a split second before it actually does it. And you'll notice on the preview screen, every time the switcher does anything, it needs to reload the preview screen. So yeah, reloading the preview screen, not a big deal, but that lack of instantaneousness when you hit the cut buttons, that definitely would have turned some people off back at the day. Probably only people who were used to actual pro grade switchers. But there's so many good and cool things that this thing can do. If you look at the preview screen, you'll notice one strikingly terrific feature that it's actually quite amazing that this thing has it, because there were so many pro grade switchers at this time, probably most pro grade switchers, costing thousands or tens of thousands of dollars that couldn't do this. This thing has a multi-viewer. You can see all 4 inputs on the screen there. They're very squished down and low res, and they're also very low frame rate, but you can see everything that's going on. You know exactly what's on each input. That is really amazing. The DFS 700, you know, that was a $15,000-$20,000 switcher in 2000. That doesn't have a multi-viewer. This $1,200 box that came out in 1993, it's got a multi-viewer. That is really cool. Next to the multi-viewer on the right, you can see what colors you've chosen. So if I hit back color, you can it cycles through some preset colors, but you can also customize the colors, and you can set border colors. So if I hit color on the program bus, or cut color as it's labeled here, you can see there's our background, our color background. Now, you can see that when I cut between the different sources, in the multi-viewer section, you can see a yellow bar at the top that highlights which source is currently live. You can see there. And when I poke the preview bus, there's a green bar below that shows which source is on the preview bus. And when you first turn the unit on, the default transition is a dissolve. So if I hit auto take, it does a dissolve, and a very fine dissolve. Nothing wrong with that at all. And the fader works just like a fader on any switcher. I can use that to dissolve between sources. But you may notice, watch this, if I quickly see that, it's that same delay as you get when hitting the cut buttons. I think it might even be a little worse using the fader. It takes a moment for the transition to start. But the funny thing is that once you've started a transition, the response is instantaneous. It's actually really, really good. But when you start the transition, that is when it just takes a while. So if you plan on doing quite a fast transition, or really it doesn't really matter the speed, but the transition can end up going faster than what you intended because of that delay. But other than that, I mean, for what you got, it's pretty fine. If I hit the wipe button here, you can see when I hit the different transitions, like there's multiple types of dissolving. When I hit wipe, the preview screen, it lists multiple types of wipes. So there's a wipe. If I use the fader, which it didn't take for some reason, there we go. Fader works good. There's no jumpiness or anything like that. It works better than the fader of a NewTek TriCaster that I have, which we'll see in a video someday. The fader is very dirty and jumpy in that. This one seems to have held up okay. And you can see that border color. You can see the split between the wipes, that border color. And does it work if I... No, it doesn't change mid-transition. But you can see on the preview screen the border color. Actually, that was a different border color. So it was actually changing the border color in the middle of the transition, but it wasn't taking effect on the transition. But you can see there the division. And of course, I can set no border color. And then there's just a clean divide between the sources. So of course I can use the directional pad here and show you the different types of wipes, and we'll just see what each one does. So that's a slide actually rather than a wipe. If I go down here, there's another type. And you can see the background color we chose takes effect here for these transitions. If I hit dissolve, see if we can see the different types of dissolves we have. Stuff like that. So if I hit zoom, picture in picture, and I do this, now there's something I want to point out here, something that's really special about this switcher for the price point that it was in. Take a look at this. So notice how both of the sources in the transition are squeezed back. And actually, let me, just to make this even more apparent, I'll use the VCR as my next transition. Take a look at this. Do you notice something? We have two sources squished down. We basically got a two box effect going on right now. This $1,200 switcher has two DVE channels. The Sony DFS 700 only has one. You had to add an upgrade card for however many hundreds, if not thousands of dollars that upgrade card would have been to get two DVE channels. It's hard to get even a modern switcher today that has more than one DVE. This thing technically has two. We've got two sources squeezed down right now, and they're playing live on the screen. That's actually incredible for a $1,200 prosumer switcher from 1993. That is really incredible. So very, very impressive. What else can I show you here? So I believe if I hit Shift, picture in picture, yes. So you can see on the preview screen, and actually apparently, yeah, there we go. I'll do this. So we can do a real picture in picture effect here. And I believe if I hold Shift and use the directional pads, I can change the size and I can stretch it if I want. And there, and I can switch live. I can switch live between the sources. So we haven't actually taken it yet. We're on the program screen, remember. So I have to hit OK. Do I hit OK? No, I think I hit auto take. And there we go. And now we've got a picture in picture on the screen. And I could do such an effect, which is one that we did at the TV station back in the day. If I get out of that, I could set color on the program bus and me on the preview bus, and do this and do that, and now we've got me in a window with a color border around the edge. And that's an effect that we did back in the day in the mid-90s. I know at least one example we used it in was we did some of our station IDs this way. Just have a pretty picture with a color background behind it. And a character generator would be used to overlay some text on top of the color background. So that's something that we did with this back in the day. And I'll hit flip, see what that looks like. I'll put me here and color bars, and I'll take that. And there's what flip looks like. If we just take a moment, I can hit the demo key, and it'll do a demonstration of various transitions between the two sources that you've selected. So here's some of the various transitions that you can have, and it'll do you can see it's randomly choosing colors as well for the border. Oh, wait. I didn't expect that. I guess this camcorder is set to, this digital 8 camcorder goes into the demo mode. That's great. Oops, I forgot about that. All right, well, we'll just keep going here. Actually, maybe not. Okay, I'll take a moment and turn off the demo mode. That was funny. So yeah, there's some of the transitions there. Now, if I hit the display button, that affects the preview display. This is how you'd normally use the preview display. You get your multi-viewer, how your colors are set up, your transition list. But if I hit display, now it becomes a true preview monitor. It shows what the next source is going to be. And I see I've come to the end of my flow scan tape that V-Westlife sent me. If I hit display again, this becomes a program monitor. So now I've got two program monitors. And you might do this back in the day because this was designed so that if you only had one video monitor, you could do everything you needed to do on the one video monitor. You would still have your VCR hooked up to the program output, the VCR that's recording your show. You'd still have that plugged into the program output, but if you only had the one monitor, you could keep that connected to your preview output, and then you could switch functions on your preview output if you needed to see program, if you needed to see your normal preview screen or your next transition. Of course, Videonics, sorry, VCR is rewinding here. Videonics recommended that you have two monitors, but you could get away with one if you had to. Now, you've seen all the fancy transitions, but one button that you don't see on here is just a cut button. It has the auto take button, but a ProGrade switcher would have just a cut button too. So you could set your you could set two different sources on your program and preview buses, and then just hit one button to cut between them. Some shows you do that way. There's a town council I do that just has two cameras, and I'm just hitting the cut button over and over for an hour and a half when I record that council meeting. This doesn't have that, but there is a way to get away with that. It turns out, and you can see each of the transitions are numbered here. Transition number 0 is cut. So if and you can see it's depicted with a pair of scissors. So now if I hit auto take, it just cuts between the sources. And you can see there once again is quite the delay going between them. You can see that the preview monitor, whenever you do a transition, the preview monitor shows the transition rather than staying on the preview screen. I assume that's just a technological limitation of the unit. But yeah, now we have a cut button. So not too bad if you just had to do a show where you were cutting between two cameras. So let's go into the setup screen, and this is where you set up your routing between audio and video sources. So I use the preview bus keys to select what source to configure, and it shows what the audio routing is. So you can see for input 1, and it actually shows, it knows whether we're using the S video or the composite video input. So it shows that we're using the S video input. And input 1 is set to bring up the audio for input 1 whenever input 1 is live. But by using the directional pad, I can choose to use input 2's audio when input 1 is live, or input 3's audio. And specifically for input 3, I can use just the left or the right channel if I want. And I can also set it so that when input 1 is up, no audio is used. If I go to input 2, same thing, input 3. And you can actually route different video inputs to the 4 inputs here. So although input A is by default set to input 1, of course, I can use the directional pad to say, when I hit input 1, I want to use input 2's video. So you can reroute the video inputs to these buttons if you want your own custom routing for whatever reason. So that is the setup menu. You can see how that works. And if I hit Shift Setup, that brings us to an advanced setup menu where you can change your headphone volume. This is the only way to adjust your headphone volume. And for the other functions, I actually have to crack open the manual. This is your input-output frame rate lock. Compensates for slight deviations in video frame rate between the inputs and the output. When it is locked, setting 0, the MX-1 adjusts the frame rate of the output by very small amounts at the end of each video field to reduce or eliminate the need to repeat or drop video fields. This is normal setting and appropriate for most equipment. This is the noise filter. MX-1 has a very sophisticated filter which adjusts the appearance of the video. The normal setting, 0, passes the full maximum quality signal through and is the best setting for most equipment. Higher settings increase filtering to compensate for video signal problems. Now I'm actually acting on the D input right now. I have to hit A, and so I don't know if you'll be able to see any difference. Maybe a hair of difference. Higher settings increase filtering to compensate for video signal problems such as video that is overprocessed using sharpness controls, enhancers, etc. Use the higher settings if you see picture lines shift to the right, horizontal white flashes, horizontal black lines at the left edge of the picture, or shredded pictures. Increase this setting until the problem is alleviated. These settings can also be used to reduce noisy video. Some settings affect the whole picture, and some only affect edges of shapes and lines. Each source has its own noise filter setting, so adjust each separately. These settings go back to 0 when power is lost. Next is the black level. So this chooses between 7.5 IRE, which is the classic NTSC standard black level, or 0 IRE, which a lot of even North American NTSC equipment uses. Probably most modern NTSC equipment uses a 0 IRE black level. Change this setting to 1 if you are working with equipment that requires 7.5 IRE. So you're setting the what the output of the unit is going to be based on. And then the final setting is composite chroma auto gain control. If a composite input source has a weak color signal, the mixer can be set to compensate. If a composite source looks pale, set the AGC setting to 1, and it'll automatically adjust color levels on all composite inputs. Most sources have correct chroma levels, and we recommend you leave this setting at 0. This does not affect S-video sources. So there you go. So if I go to input B and go to the advanced setup, and Doesn't seem to change anything that I can find. Or any of these, really. But anyway, so that is the advanced setup menu. Let's just, what do we want to do? I'll show you the freeze function. So you can see it has frozen me on the screen. And I believe, yeah, once you do anything, it unfreezes. Speed button changes the speed of the transition. So if I just choose, this transition looks fun. So if I take that, wow, that that was very janky looking, as if someone programmed that by hand to go around. So that's speed 4. You can see on the screen there. If I hit the speed button, set it to 9. That was very fast, and also I transitioned to the same source. Do that again. Wow. And if I go to the slowest, it loops around. That is very janky looking. There you go. There's some pretty cool transitions here. That one looks pretty cool. This one with the little light bulb picture. That looks pretty cool. Except here's the thing, that's the Luma keyer. I'm just gonna check to make sure this is still recording. Yes, it is. That's the Luma keyer. So that little light bulb symbol transition, this is the Luma keyer. This is how they implemented Luma keying. It's as a transition. And what you're supposed to do is use the fader to choose the amount of Luma keying, which is fine and all, except for a couple of things. First of all, it doesn't work very well. Second of all, it only keys out white. It does not key out black. That's nonsense to me, because most of the time when you want to Luma key stuff, you would be keying out the black. Your very basic character generator would be white text on a black background, so makes no sense to me. But if I cut to the character generator, and yeah, so it keys out white, there I am. And if I do this, there you can see it starts by like keying out my face and other light colored things. It's a cool effect. It looks pretty rad. But this is a terrible implementation of Luma keying. So yeah, that's too bad. But as a transition, it does look cool. You can also reverse the transition. So if I go this one, which is kind of a fun one. Actually, that's a bad example, although that is a nice transition. What about this one? So yeah, you can see it starts small and then grows in, but if I hit reverse, you can see the arrow changes the other direction, and now I shrink instead of growing. And I believe, yeah, so if I hit shift reverse, it's now going to go back and forth. We saw this function on the DFS 700. So color bars go out, color bars go in. It's going to flip back and forth. So that's how that works. If I got to hit shift reverse again to go back to the normal direction. So let's demonstrate the chroma keyer. So let's put me back on the screen, and I've got to remember how to do this. I might do this wrong, but I'm going to put the character generator on the preview bus, and I'm going to hit chroma key. I may be doing this backward. No, I've done this right. So now on the preview screen, we show the source that we're going to key out, and I've got this little cursor on the screen that I can manipulate with the directional pad. And what I need to do is use this cursor to choose the color that I want to key out. This will be pretty easy because in this case the whole thing's solid green except for the text. So I hover over the color I want to key out, and then I'm going to hit OK. And for some reason, like I said, this was $1,200. This was damn cheap for the amount of functionality you got, and so they cut costs somewhere. So there's a little bit of weird noisiness happening on the input for some reason. So I've got to go over again, hit OK again, and actually that's pretty good. And at this point, so yeah, so it's a well-implemented chroma keyer. Even though this is a cheap switcher, the chroma keyer has actually been implemented very well because you can go and choose multiple colors to key out. And this is really important because in the real world, like if you put a human in front of a green screen, it can be hard to evenly light up a green screen. Oftentimes you'll end up with little patches of the green screen that's not lit quite the same as the rest of it. And a bad chroma keyer, you won't be able to completely key out all of it. You might leave it with a little bit of a noisy shadow. Although good software-based chroma keyers like that are built into Adobe Premiere, they do a good job of handling this as well. But this thing has an actually good chroma keyer because you can make it choose multiple colors to key out, which you can't do directly on the DFS 700, although I think you can change like a tolerance setting on the DFS 700. But on this thing, not only can you choose multiple colors to key out, you can see on the preview screen here, it's done an okay job, but you can see a green outline around the letter still. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Shift, and using the directional pad, I can fine-tune the keying. I have to press the buttons, but you can see I can fine-tune the keying, and I can go left and right as well. And I think that's pretty much as far as it goes, but that's a good result. And now if I hit auto take, that's pretty gosh darn clean. That looks pretty good. So yeah, actually pretty decent chroma keyer on this, and you can use it to key white and black as well, so you don't really need a fully functional Luma keyer. The chroma keyer works pretty good. And you can see my text had a black outline around it. It's preserved that black outline pretty well. I think I can see just a hair of like green outlining. For some reason, oh, now what are we doing? Let's get out of here. Chroma key. Let's just go back into it. Yeah, so for some reason there's a weird, you can see these vertical lines on the preview screen, so it's making it a little harder. So yeah, this thing isn't perfect. You might have been able to see when we were playing the VHS tape, as amazing as it is that this thing doesn't need Genlock and it has a time-based corrector on every input, you could see the VHS tape jittering a little bit. Good tapes I've found play really cleanly on this, but noisier, lower quality recordings like this FlowScan tape, it has a harder time. It makes the time-based corrector act up a little bit, and you could see probably a little bit of jittering in the video. So what else have we got to demonstrate? So you can see both of these two LEDs are lit up. That means that every time I cut to a different source, it's following it's taking the audio input for that source as well. And if I wanted to, so for example, now you'll notice if I go to input C here, it's showing the color, and that's because the VCR is turned off. It's not generating a signal anymore. So anything that doesn't have a valid signal, it'll put up the color, which is actually nice. So let me start playing the tape again.
When you reach your next gear,
there we
your
go.
engine RPM will be
So,
down as low as you can possibly have it and still pull the load.
So yeah, we can hear the sound. And now when we switch back to me, we no longer hear the sound. So if I do this, and I set it to only switch video, you can see we no longer hear the VCR audio. And if I do this, so that only the audio light is lit up, it'll only switch audio. So now when I hit cut C,
Up against the governor,
we can hear the VCR, but I'm still on the program bus.
fuel economy.
So that is how that works. And indeed, when you do dissolves, it does fade between the audio sources.
Gain situation without changing your road speed.
So that's cool too, that it can do that. So while it's not an audio mixer, it does do proper transitioning between the audio sources, which is pretty cool. Now, I think the only thing left to demonstrate is the compose function. So, I may have to reteach myself how to do this, but I'm going to go into compose mode. And yes, so in the compose function, everything you draw in this mode goes on top of a live source. So I can choose what that live source, what that background will be. So I'll use myself as the background. And now we have, in the compose mode, we have this flashing square. And we can resize this square using the shift key. And we can change the aspect ratio for this square. And what this square is showing is it's saying whatever I want to put, whether it be a color rectangle or a frame grab of a source, it's going to be that big, and that's where it's going to be, and that's the aspect ratio it's going to be. So at this point, it's going to put whatever I choose on the preview bus. So I'm going to choose to put a frame grab of input C here. So when I do that, you can see it actually shows a live image of input C using its DVE, but once I move the rectangle, there, it's now just a frame grab. And maybe I'll make a smaller rectangle. I'll change the aspect ratio. Oops. I'll make it a bit bigger. I'll do that, and I'll hit B. And there's input B. And maybe I will put myself down here. There we go. And I can also place a color if I want by hitting the color button, and it'll do both the back and border colors. So if I hit color, and I can do whatever color just like that. And of course you can do this whole thing if I make this rectangle big enough, at which point the UI becomes a little slower to do stuff. But if I do this, you have to make sure it's in the center of the screen, but I can cover the entire picture with a color or an input, whatever. But if I overwrite anything, like if I go here and do this, let's pick a nice light blue here. There we go. I've covered the color bars there permanently. So once you've overwritten something, you can't get it back. You can erase stuff if I position the rectangle and hit Shift OK. That'll erase everything in that rectangle's region. And if I make a nice big rectangle, and go as big as I can, and then shrink it down to a skinny rectangle, like that. And I can put a line, like that. So there you go. That's how you can use the compose feature. Once you're done, you hit auto take, and it puts your mess onto the program bus. So that's how that works. And I can absolutely see something like this being used along with a character generator to make title slides of some sort. Now, what happens if I do this? Yeah, everything's erased. Everything gone as soon as you switch the input. So that is how that works. I think the only other thing that I have not yet demonstrated is the input effects. So if I hit input effects, there are various digital effects. Let's choose me, that you can apply. Monochrome, invert, and a different kind of invert, which actually looks kind of cool. And you can do multiple ones simultaneously. We can mirror and flip. And you'll notice when I flip vertically here, it actually gets a little bit pixelated. That's a technical limitation that's actually mentioned in the manual. We can do a mosaic pattern. And you can see it gets a little bit jumpy once again. It's not perfect. This sort of reduces the frame rate, I guess. And I believe this is a posturization effect, yeah. So what happens if I go do that? Input effects. There we go. And actually, the color inversion looks pretty cool on color bars. Go back to me. I've still got the posterization going on. And what's going on here? Oh, is this just kind of a limiter? Like it just limits what the brightest value can be? How's that described? Let's take a look here in the old manual. Oh, it's called solarization. That makes sense with the little sun. Modeled after a classic photographer's effect, turns the lightest parts of the picture negative, makes them darker. This only affects pictures with very bright portions. Okay. So what if I go... Okay, fair enough. Alright, make sure everything's turned off here, and it is. Well, there. I think I've demonstrated everything with this thing. You've seen most of what it can do. You've seen its limitations, such as the speed with cutting and the initial responsiveness of the fader, and that some of the like the time-based corrector doesn't act quite perfectly if you have a if you've got a VCR with a not quite optimal quality recording on it. You can see the picture jittering a bit. But there's a lot of stuff it does great. The chroma keyer works really well. The compose feature is fun. A lot of the transitions are very, very cool. And all in all, I would say this is a really well thought out device, especially for $1,200 back in the day. No wonder that Videonics just became the king of prosumer video in the 90s. Between this and their title maker and their other products, they just kind of wiped the floor of the prosumer video industry with this stuff. Not only the prosumer video industry, but the low-end professional broadcast industry. Your small community television stations, they bought these things. That's how good they were. And 25, almost 30 years on, some of these are showing their age. My other one, the chroma keyer doesn't work right anymore. Actually, I don't know if I showed that. Let me show you what the chroma keyer, I took a video of this when I discovered it. This is what the chroma keyer on the other MX-1 I've got, what it does. So I've got a character generator coming in, white text on a green background. You can't get much easier to key than that. So I put my background up. I'm going to go into chroma key mode. I've got my character generator on preview. I hit chroma key, and you just hit OK when the little cursor is over the color to be keyed out, which it is. So I hit OK. And we get an extremely noisy image, which, can happen sometimes. It shouldn't have happened because that's a solid color background. It's not like a green curtain where there might be some differences in the shades. But you're supposed to be able to use the cursor keys to fine-tune the amount of keying. And there is just no way I am able to get a better key than this. And then on top of this, when you exit the chroma key mode, there appears to be a software bug where the user interface on the preview screen now has keying artifacts on it. And there's absolutely no way to get rid of that aside from power cycling the switcher. So yeah, as you can see, the chroma keyer on that works very oddly, very odd bugs, and I can only assume that's due to some sort of electronic failure, whether it's bad capacitors or some semiconductors that aren't working right anymore. I don't know. And of course, same thing, like if I go into the chroma key mode, you can see on the preview screen these weird horizontal bars. I suspect that a lot of this is age-related. I've noticed once in a while with this thing, I'll turn it on and not all of the inputs will show up. Some of the inputs will just be blank in the multi-viewer, even though there's valid signals going into them. So there's just some bugs and quirks with this thing. Some of it just might be because of cost cutting and the low price point. Some of it might be because it's not aging very well electronically, but what a cool little box that this is. And it's just very, very impressive what you were able to get almost 30 years ago. I got all of the original documentation with these switchers, which is really cool. So let's take a look at those. Starting, of course, with the manual, which I used to reference a couple of features that we took a look at. Very well written, very comprehensive. It's 80 pages in length, and yeah, very good manual. And you can find this online as well. Some regulatory information. You got a 2-year warranty. An invitation to receive a free sample issue of Video Maker magazine, which is a magazine that I reference in research once in a while. I go on Google Books and find articles about stuff. Once in a while, Video Maker ends up being something that I read for research. And of course, they talked about Videonics equipment as well. Registration card, I guess. You can see a list of products that Videonics was still selling in 1996 or 7. Interesting, they were selling the Title Maker 2000 and the Title Maker 3000 at the same time. Although I guess that kind of makes sense because they were still selling the MX-1 at the same time that they were selling its replacement, the MX Pro. The Title Maker 2000 came out with the MX-1 and the Title Maker 3000 came out with the MX Pro. So I guess maybe it was just kind of a good and better kind of, you got the choice if you wanted to save a little bit of money by getting the older model. The Thumbs Up 2000 was a weird edit controller that it just had two main buttons, a thumbs up and a thumbs down. It basically set in and out points for editing purposes. The home video producer was a combo package of the Thumbs Up and one other piece of equipment, I forget what. The Power Script, they only tried to get into the real high-end broadcast market one time, and that was with the Power Script. The Power Script was a real character generator. The Title Makers only generated text, which still qualifies them as a character generator, at least by standards up until the end of the 1980s. But the Power Script was an actual, like, by the standards of the 90s and 2000s, character generator that could handle graphics, and it supported Adobe PostScript, and very powerful piece of equipment compared to the Title Makers meant for the actual broadcast market. It would be cool if I could ever get a hold of one, but they just don't exist on eBay. The Edit Suite, something we'll look at in a future video. They had a section of the on CompuServe, which was kind of cool. Reference card. So kind of a very short getting started guide. It's got a giant list of all of the transitions with text descriptions of what those transitions will do. So if you didn't feel like just dabbling around and seeing what they all looked like, you could just look them up here. So there you go. I don't know if this exists online. If it doesn't, then I should scan it and put it on the Internet Archive. Same with this digital video primer. So this was just basically a one-on-one on the types of editing, what time-based correctors and frame synchronizers are for. I think it talks about Genlock, even though it's not applicable in this piece of equipment. So yeah, that was kind of a cool read. This is cool, a brochure of their entire product lineup of the time. Again, I don't know if this exists online. If it doesn't, then I should scan this stuff. There you can see that's a typical complete Videonics editing system. You've got the switcher, you've got the edit controller, and there's a Title Maker 2000. Oh yes, so the home video producer, that was the Thumbs Up 2000 and the Sound Effects Mixer 2000, which was a sound effects mixer that had like 60, I think, digitized audio effects. Very corny. There's the Thumbs Up itself. So there's the Title Maker 3000, the last Title Maker that Videonics made. Very sleek looking unit. I got two of these. I got two mixers and I got one of these for each mixer as well. Both of them work fine. We will look at the Title Maker 3000 in the future. Very cool character generator. We used it today in this video, in fact, just to give away the secret, if you're still watching this far. The Edit Suite, AB Roll Edit Controller. The mixer. Videonics took a stab at software products as well. Interfacing with computers. They definitely saw where the future lied, but they just they couldn't get anything compelling out in time. There's the Power Script, an actual broadcast grade character generator. And yeah, if you go on the Internet Archives, you can look up their website and the Wayback Machine. And that is the cool pile of documentation I got with this. And that's the story on the Videonics MX-1 digital video mixer from the 1990s. What a fun and cool piece of vintage video equipment, and a very historical piece of vintage video equipment. It's very cool to have learned that many small public access television stations got off the ground with these and other Videonics products that allowed them for the first time to do many things that they couldn't do before, many of the things that larger television stations were already doing, but with much more expensive pieces of equipment. So this is just really cool. I love the history behind this, and these are very fun to play with. This is not the last time that you'll see these. As I've said throughout this video, there are many other examples of Videonics products that I own that I will be making videos of in the future. And most of those products were designed to work with the MX-1. So you will see this again as an accessory to other Videonics stuff that I show in the future, and I'll be really excited to show you guys that stuff as well. If you want one of these, now these go for way more money on eBay than I think they should. I am not sure why people are paying so much money for them. Untested units, or units that have tested bad, if you're lucky, you can get them for 50 bucks on eBay, but most of them seem to be going in the $75 to $100 range. Tested good units, if you're lucky, you might find one for 100 bucks, but most of them seem to be going for the $150 to $200 range. I don't know why. I don't know who is paying that much money for these. I wonder if people are buying these for the time-based corrector, like just to use them as a standalone time-based corrector. But that doesn't make sense because the time-based corrector, as we've seen in this video, is not very good in these. And I can't imagine that there are so many people like me who are buying these just to tinker with them. I'm not sure, but despite the fact that there are lots of these on eBay at any given time, they're all selling for that much money when you look at the sold listings. So I don't know. It's, you know, it's too bad because I love playing with something like this, but once I've shown it to you guys in a YouTube video, I don't really actually know how I'm going to use this ever again after I've used it as an accessory to demonstrating other Videonics products. I wish I had friends who, imagine if the sentence just ended there, I wish I had friends. No, but I wish I had other weird friends like me, local to me, who I could team up with to do something with crap like this and all the other vintage video equipment that I have, whether to make a podcast that was entirely produced with vintage equipment or something like that. Some way to use these in a way other than just one person doing a demonstration for a YouTube video, but it's the way it is. If I was closer to like the Vintage Computer Festival East, you bet your bottoms that I would bring this and so much other stuff in at a VCF East and set up as big of a table of stuff as I could for other people to play with. But I don't live close enough to where I would ever want to travel to do that. But so yeah, it leaves me not really knowing how to use what to do with one of these after I've shown it to you guys. But for now, you'll see it in future videos of other Videonics equipment. And that's it. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed learning about this device as much as I've enjoyed showing it to you. It's been really fun. And I want to thank my Patreon supporters. Their support helps with me making these YouTube videos, so I really appreciate them for that. So until next time, I will see you in the next video.
2 pounds of clementines. Jesus.
I know, who needs that many clementines?
Although, you know, the way Liam eats oranges.
A 1-gallon drum of mayonnaise.
You could get that at Costco, probably.
Probably.
Yeah. Costco really scares me. Like, you know, sometimes you go there and you're like, I'm just gonna go and have a hot dog, and then you see people rolling out with fucking toilets. You're like, what the fuck?
You know what my bucket list store that I want to go to someday, and they only exist in the southern US states. I want to go to a Buc-ee's.
Okay. What does Buc-ee's sell?
Buc-ee's is a gas station chain, but it's like if the world's greatest gas station had a baby with Walmart.
Oh.
It's the store, it's these massive gas stations that have like 40 pumps, but then inside the store, they sell food. And everything they sell is all Buc-ee's branded. It's all their own stuff made just for these stores. There's food, there's freaking snack foods and burritos and burgers and shit. Mm-hmm. And they sell clothing, and they sell plush toys of their mascot, which is a beaver. And
oh my god.
It is the most American, especially because it originates in Texas, and that's where most of them are. It is the most Texas-ass thing. And it's just, God, I wish there was one up in the Northeast.
Right.
I would make a road trip just to see it.
Buc-ee's is my 7-Eleven. I really want to go to a 7-Eleven. Because they're Korean owned.
Oh.
And they have certain ones of them on the West Coast have like ramen stations. Oh. Where you can go in and pick a ramen and like make a ramen, and they have toppings and stuff like that you can put in them.
Okay.
And I really just want to go, but they also sell a lot of Korean based food, and I love Korean or Japanese food, so.
Yeah, man. Friggin' Buc-ee's.
Buc-ee's. I get it.
Maybe someday.
Yeah.